Hello, everyone. This is Jamie Henkel, Learning and Inclusion Manager at PFLAG National. My pronouns are she and her. And we are here today for something to talk about live. And I have the honor of introducing my colleague, my teammate, and my partner in crime, Jean Marie Navetta, who's going to lead today's conversation for us.
Hey, Jamie. Hello.
Hello.
Is it an honor or is it like a dubious honor sometimes? We don't actually know what it's like to introduce me for this show. So hello, everybody, and welcome to Something to Talk About Live. We decided that it's been a very, very difficult week for a lot of different reasons. And we thought that maybe it might be nice to switch gears for a day and have a little bit of fun with our conversation today. So if you are going to be joining us, we are talking about LGBTQ people and gaming. And if you want to get today's article, you should visit straightforequality.org/discussion series, and you'll be able to download the article that we are talking about today. But as I mentioned, we are talking about LGBTQ gamers. And so I want to introduce my two co-staff members at PFLAG, Jamel and Sean. Do I have you? I think you're here. Hello. Do you guys want to quickly introduce yourselves and say something, and then we'll get to work? Jamel, go first.
Hi, I'm Jamel. I'm back again, super excited, and Sean and I are ready to nerd out.
And Sean?
That's true. Glad to be here again and excited to talk about gaming today because it's fun.
Because it is fun, because it totally is fun. So the article that we are using today was in Out magazine written by Taylor Henderson, and the report was that 10% of gamers are LGBT. And actually, when you look at the numbers in the study, we said about 40% of people are gay and lesbian. We saw 50% reporting as bi and 10% reporting as trans and non-binary. And so there were some really interesting statistics in there and some interesting findings. And so I want to get to work on this one as somebody who aspires to be a gamer, but is really, really, really bad at it. I'm glad that you two are here with me. So I want to know from both of you, did those numbers in the Nielsen study surprise you? Did they not surprise you? What do you think is going on behind the numbers?
I'll go. So the numbers did surprise me, but not for the reason you think it is. So they said about 10% of LGBTQ plus folks are gamers. I think that is super low, like crazy low, like large margin of error low. Just from the communities that I'm in and the folks that I know, I go to gaming conventions all year long. Like, I think it's very, very low. I would hypothesize it's got to be closer to 30, 40, maybe even 50%, depending on, age and other demographics. But I'm glad they decided to jump in and try to, analyze the data. It's a good starting point.
And what do you think, Sean?
I agree with Jamel. The numbers are not surprising. I do think they're low. I realize this is a limited study and there's not a lot. They didn't poll massive amounts of people. And I think that if we looked at it from a cultural perspective, gaming isn't always very inclusive for folks. So I wouldn't be surprised if those numbers are underreported across the board in all places, at least as things stand right now.
So I'm, of course, going to just start throwing things in that we didn't plan on talking about because that's more fun, isn't it? And we're supposed to be having fun. So I want to know, sort of inside of this space, what do you think the attraction is for so many of us to be gamers? I mean, I think we all have our own theories, but for both of you, what comes to mind? So maybe Jamel start it and Sean jump in.
I think there are a lot of points of entry, actually. I just remember as a young person wanting to feeling different, not always feeling comfortable enough to go play basketball on the court. But I had a Nintendo, I had a Genesis, and it was accessible, it was easy, it was an escape. I got to invest in these Fantasyland characters or whatever genre of game that I was playing. And then as I got older and started, getting good at these games, I started going to tournaments. So there was a sense of competition. I started to build a friend group around many of these games, and it's kind of start from there. But I do think that's one aspect of it.
Sean.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry. The escapism is a huge part of it for me. In the article, it talked about how they feel like it might be because of escapism. And I think it's more than escapism in that people get to explore their identities or express them in ways that they can't necessarily do in their day-to-day lives. I know for me, as a trans person, being able to play a male character in a video game for the first time was like mind blowing, because I was like, oh, this could be me. Or like, I was totally that person who would play The Sims and like choose these different aspects of things that I want to explore about myself and figure out new and different ways of being.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting as I was thinking about it for the games that I do play, and I'm not quite as savvy as you are. I always thought that it was fun because I wasn't a girl. And, in gaming, often girls were kind of marginalized, and I was just a character. Like, you didn't know who I was, you didn't know what I was, and I was completely judged just on how I did, which I'm going to say in Super Mario Kart, I'm not that. Go ahead and laugh at me. It's okay. But I think that kind of can be an equalizer for people too, that finally we're being judged on how well we play and not necessarily on anything else. And I think for those of us who have had a hard time finding safe spaces, this could be one. I mean, although it's not always totally safe. So I want to talk about what some of those games are, because we know that some games tend to generate very safe spaces. Some of them are kind of notorious for actually not being particularly inclusive, particularly for people who are marginalized. So I want to know, are there games that you both love that you think people should be looking at, especially if you are an LGBTQ plus and ally gamer, or organizations that you think people should be looking at? So actually, Sean, why don't we start with you this time, and then we'll jump up to Jamal.
Sure. So I definitely want to call out that today, the very first video game with a trans masculine protagonist is coming out. It's a 3-part series, and the first part comes out today. It's called Tell Me Why. I don't know much about it other than it's a story-based game. It's not the kind of game that I would normally play, but I might give it a try because I want to see that sort of inclusion in sort of where my spaces that I'm in. And the other, do you just want to talk about games, or do you want to talk about organizations?
Oh, keep going. Whatever you got. Let's put it all out there.
Cool. And I also think that seeking out gaming communities that are inclusive. So I'm part of an online gaming community that is the largest LGBTQ gaming community in the world, and it's called Queercraft. And it was based in Minecraft, but now it's sort of branched out to different games that folks play, and a real community, which felt like home in ways that other spaces didn't.
Awesome. Jamal.
Man, there's so many. I wish we could sit here just all day and just like ramble.
We totally can.
So I think some games that are really fun for queer folks, Mass Effect 1 through 3, there's a customization feature that lets you be anybody you want to be. And a lot of folks have really enjoyed that experience, plus the actual story that's being told. You can be whatever gender you want. You can connect with people. It's a great time. Dream Daddy and Stardew Valley are 2 very popular games amongst LGBT folks. They're both kind of first-person kind of strategery game where you get to live out your life meeting people. One of them is on a farm and you do things. The other one, you are a dream daddy and you're going on dates, trying to find the love of your life. That's a fun one. I personally have had a lot of luck in the rhythm game community. I play a ton of rhythm games, like competitively. Like I will go to a tournament in a heartbeat. Dance Dance Revolution, Beatmania 2DX. Like there's a large queer community in that space. Smash Brothers, there's a big gay and queer community there. Like if you're gay and you want to play games, literally just find out what like interests you, because I can almost assure you that there's an LGBT community embedded somewhere. Play what you like.
It's true. I love playing Star Trek online. And I remember once I finally got a little bit good at it, I started to see if there's anybody else LGBT. And there were so many groups that were out there. It was actually kind of hard to pick which one you wanted to be in. And it was such a nice feeling to know that after I had built this character that I liked, that sort of felt like me and felt comfortable, and I had kind of established this identity, I was then able to find people like me. And it was kind of nice also, especially as somebody who's kind of had some rough times in some spaces, to go to the space and sort of know that you've self-selected a group that's probably going to be a little bit more predisposed to play along with you. And I think that that's kind of nice to have that option, that's grown up. I was actually talking about before we started going to the first ever, it was originally GamerCon, now it's GamerX, and really being shocked at how every kind of game that was being played had a queer fan base. And a really dedicated one, and one that was really looking for community too, which I think is important. So I want to talk a little little bit, because we've sort of talked about some of those games. I want to ask you, do you think there are certain kinds of games that attract more queer people than others? I mean, do you think RPGs tend to attract more people? Have you sort of seen any delineations of where people are showing up?
I have not. I think people are, I mean, you see it in every other avenue right now. Like, people are just choosing to live authentically and do what they want to do, and they kind of figure it out, along the way. I think a kind of old idea is that, there's lots of LGBT folks that love fantasy, a lot of like LGBT like D&D groups, but like gamer culture is now kind of pop culture. Like, it's something that's like in the mainstream, and so people just play whatever they want.
Yeah. And there's a lot of options now too.
It's accessible.
I want to talk about what we think is going to happen, because so much has grown out of the gaming community. It's, it really is a culture now. The fact that there are tournaments that you can go to, there are conventions that you can go to, there are groups that you can join there. I mean, when we were allowed to see each other in person, there were ways to do that too. Remember that? Remember what that was like? Someday we will again. So what do you think the future of this looks like? Do you think there's a lot of potential in these communities? Do you think that there are some risks that we should be thinking about and looking at in these communities? And what do you think we should be doing as people who enjoy this, no matter which games you're playing? And that includes my text version of Zork. I'm that old. I am that old. What do you think we could be doing to create more inclusive gaming spaces? And what do you think is going to happen with them? And I want either one of you to jump in on this one.
I'll go. So I would actually kind of flip the question. Like, I want to know what straight people are going to do when the gays take over gaming, because that's exactly that's literally what's happening right now. So I don't know like how deep you guys are into like fighting games, but like the number one player for fighting games is queer. They're non-binary, and they're a furry. Their name is Sonic Fox. And he goes to Evo is this big fighting game competition. He's won like the last 6 years in a row. He's made like almost $1 million just like by playing video games. But you see the same thing popping up in other like gaming communities where that top person or the top few people are queer. It's the same thing for Dance Dance Revolution. Chris Chike just won like for the third year in a row. Like, these are people that have climbed the ranks, got to the top, and they're like public figures, like making a living just off of playing video games.
And they're out. Like, that's the most amazing part of it. They're doing this as out people in this space. That's an interesting question. Would you like to play in our queer universe, Sean?
Yes, I had not thought of it that way. I'm actually really interested in talking more about that. I took a different direction, and I thought about, if I were a young person now looking to go into game development, I would feel more like fostered to create games that represent who I am as a person. And I think that, sort of, if we look towards the future and we look toward where we're headed, particularly folks who are looking to get into game development programming now are probably feeling like they have this ability to create that culture that they want. And I also think it's with the advent of indie gaming and sort of as it's growing, we have the opportunity to say, oh yeah, I really want to fund a game like Dream Daddy. I really want to fund a game like Stardew Valley, because I see myself in that. And then, so as a community, we can put ourselves back into that space.
I didn't even think about that, about how we actually are funding the creation of some games. I've seen games that I liked in the past that have kind of made comebacks, and they've made comebacks on Kickstarter campaigns. Yep. And ones that I've probably given to because I remember how much fun I had and how it made me feel about it. Jamel, do you think, because I know that we've talked in other contexts about the importance of funding the creators, and do you think that is going to inspire more people? Do you think that more people are likely to enter the field because there seems to be more support out there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's like, you mentioned Kickstarter, but like there's a Kickstarter or a GoFundMe for all kinds of stuff. And it goes beyond like just video games. Like, I've seen many queer tabletop board games that have gotten funded through crowdfunding. Yeah. And so I think the need is there. I think the skill and the tools are there to build the games that we want to see. But still, like, these major production studios are run by generally old white men, and they're not giving, these queer folks the opportunity to, build these games. They don't want to take a chance on that content. And so it's folks have had a difficult path, but I think the tools are there, and if they were accessed in the right way, yeah, absolutely.
And it's definitely changing. I think as our workforce changes, as the people who are doing the development changing, we're definitely going to see some of this, especially if people are sort of let into those spaces. I want to ask one more question before we go to questions from our viewers for today. And I know that there have been lots of comments and questions going on, which is when things go off the rails, and this actually is one of the most intimidating things about gaming, at least it has been for me, when things go off the rails and things get ugly and people get mean, what do you think people can do? I mean, what do you think is, first of all, as a gamer, how do you handle that? Because both of you are far more into this than I am. So what have you done? And what do you think your allies can do in these spaces? I think that would be something really useful.
You want to go first, Sean?
Yeah, sure. I think, so what I've learned to do, it sort of becomes a coping skill, sort of like you don't necessarily come out to every person you see on the street. But you also sort of, in these scenarios, in gaming communities in particular, with online communications and things like that, I've just sort of learned to grow a tough skin and remove myself from situations that felt unsafe or wrong and call people out. And I think allies could do the same. And I think it is important for allies to show up in spaces that aren't just, physically going to a pride parade or something like that, but also the spaces that now we're all accessing all the time on the internet and games.
Yeah. Jamal, what do you think?
So for our ally friends out there that play video games, I think this particular space is a space where allies are really, really needed. I've been called every word under the sun just trying to play a video game. Like, unfortunately, there is a large population of gamers that are not tolerant of people that are not like themselves. And, people try to pick up on clues about maybe how I spoke or things that I've said, and that's how they kind of figure out, oh, that person's different. So if you are an ally and you are playing with someone that is queer, please speak up. You use your voice, like challenge those negative, ideas or engage those folks in conversations. It's very helpful, and it makes an easier time for folks like Sean and I to also speak up and have that conversation. Mm-hmm. I think a little bit can go a long way in that respect.
I mean, use your privilege. One of the games that I play, I know that the group that I belong to actually had ground rules. And before you even became part of a group, before you even accepted, you had to accept that you were not going to make any racist statements, transphobic, homophobic, and it sort of went down the line. And it was established from day one. And I actually saw people get removed from the group because they had violated the policy. And I think that's, there's sort of this self-policing that goes on in the space. And I think that's really important to do too. So I'm going to give you both. We want to do one last chance. So for everybody who is watching, I want you to plug some stuff that people need to look up before we go to questions and comments. And Jamie, we're almost ready for you, so get ready. So Sean, tell people what they need to be looking at today.
Gosh, I don't know. I think it's interesting to look at how massively MMOs, massive multiplayer online games, are developing and how communities are growing there in a way that they haven't before. So that's something that is interesting.
Yeah, and pay attention to how it's developing. I think in the shape that's happening. Jamal, what are people supposed to be watching for or paying attention to?
I don't even know which direction to point people. There are so many. One thing that I think is interesting is the use of storytelling for queer folks done so in games. I know due to the number of queer folks that are interested in gaming, developers some of them have been early adopters and have actually tried to show up. So I play a ton of Overwatch. I don't know if you've heard that one. Like I've clocked a stupid amount of hours playing this game, but they've been really, really good at embedding folks of color, LGBT folks with different abilities, like in the game, and I appreciate that. So look out for that.
Definitely. Well, let's see if we can get Jamie back in here, because I've seen a lot of comments and a bunch of questions. I saw people even asking what platform we were playing on. So, Jamie, what do we have?
Yeah, I did want to get to that question. I think somebody was wondering what platform Tell Me Why is available
on. My understanding is that it's available on all platforms. It's available on Steam, and I know it's been specifically advertised for Xbox, but I think it's also just generally available.
Great.
And And this is a question that I have for you all, and you know why I'm asking this question because I've asked you about the docuseries a bunch of times already. But I was wondering if there is like a fun fact or a tidbit from the history of LGBTQ gaming that you'd like to share with folks that have joined us.
Can I do it? Can I do it? Can I tell the one that I know? I know one, like literally one. One, and if you don't know about this, you need to look it up today. And it's the game, The Gay Blade, which I just recently learned about, which was sort of one of the first known queer-generated games, which put you in a position to fight right-wing extremists. And the really fascinating story about this, which is on that Netflix documentary that we've all been sort of obsessing over, was that the code was actually lost. The developer lost the code literally in a move. And it was recently rediscovered. So you actually can go and download it. And in the last thing, your big boss that you need to fight is Jerry Falwell. So preview on that one. But it was the first really known one queer created for queers. And I found it so fascinating. And the idea of it going away and then coming back fascinates me. So I don't know, Sean and Jamel, if you have other little tidbits.
I can't top that one.
I agree.
There's one fact and she just took it. What else do we have?
The docuseries that we're talking about is called High Score. It's on Netflix, and the reason I feel like I kept watching is in the very first episode they talk about the game Space Invaders, and the first person ever to win like a global competition in Space Invaders is a trans woman. And the story that she told as she was competing before her transition and why this game was so important to her, and how winning the competition led her to start a career in game. Like it was something that really appealed to me, and it wasn't what I was expecting. And so that's another sort of interesting piece of history. And I have not seen many other questions come in. So if there are questions that people would like us to talk about, please feel free to send them in on the chat in whatever platform you're watching on. But what I have seen is a lot of different people sharing, the types of games that they play. Somebody mentioned that they're a dedicated gamer, that they identify as queer and old. Somebody mentioned that, when they played in years past, they always liked playing a girl character. Folks have mentioned that, where did it go? That they found that video games could be a really great icebreaker when dating. So let me pose that as a question. Has that ever been the case for any of you all, that your involvement in gaming or gaming culture has been a way to break the ice?
Absolutely. I want to know your Harry Potter house. I want to know your top 3 games to play. If it's a specific game, I want to know the main characters that you play when you play that game. Those have been great conversations to have, and have really served as a foundation, especially when you're getting to know something. It's something that brings you together, and then you can critique the community and talk about the game. Absolutely.
I met my fiance through gaming, so totally.
I didn't know that. Wow.
I have no comment, but it looks like my brother is watching, and he's much smarter than I am, and he's also a way better gamer. And the point, we actually talked about this earlier today, and he kept talking about it. You can inhabit any character that you want. I mean, you can be who you need to be. And I think that for people who don't have access to safe spaces to be who they are, gaming can be really profound. I actually do have a question for the two of you. And because as we think about this, because we've kind of talked about our, gaming characters as one dimensional, like, do you see a queer character? Do you see a character of color? Do you see this? Are you starting to see any games where there are more multi-dimensional characters? So, for example, a queer person of color, or are we still sort of dealing with this on a single plane of identity? Have you seen any developments in that?
I think it's a both and not necessarily an either or. Also think someone else mentioned this previously, I believe in the comments, but I think there are certain types of characters that the gays and the queers just gravitate to, and then they don't always present in the way that you think they're going to present. where my mind went in that moment, Bayonetta. So the game Bayonetta is about this witch who is basically trying to save the world. She attacks with her hair. She has prehensile hair. Her boots have guns on them, but she's really flamboyant, really extra, and she's just all about just like being glam, and like everybody loved it. But
How did I not play this?
I think so. Yes, it's a both and in the fact that we're seeing more queer characters, or we're seeing more like characters of color, but I think some of the characters that speak to the community don't necessarily always look in the way that you would assume.
Interesting. Jamie, any other comments that we wanted to share with people?
So somebody else mentioned that for them, fighting games and survival horror games are sort of where it was at for them. The same person, Frank, mentioned playing Resident Evil earlier in the comments, and so I was wondering, just sort of personally, do you think when it comes to those more negative environments, when you hear name calling and people saying things that are unkind, that it trends more towards a specific type of game or to an age demographic, or like I have some preconceived notions and personal biases that games that trend younger might be more aggressively negative spaces, but that might just because of past trauma with teenage boys. Like I don't know. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
I think in my experience, there have been more instances of sort of anti-LGBT language and sentiments expressed in first-person shooter online spaces that are predominantly younger men, teenage boys in particular. And I think that in other spaces, it's more targeted to be specifically anti-LGBT versus just the casual, like just calling someone a slur in like everyday vernacular.
Yeah.
I would have said the exact same thing, Sean. That's been my experience. Anything sports oriented, war games, first or third person shooters, those tend to attract younger, sometimes as young as 10, 11, but I would say through maybe early 30s. And those, I mean, we all want to win and we're all competitive, but they go a different direction with it.
And I think that might be some part of the reason that some people just don't go into pursuing certain types of games. Like I know for me, that stereotype, I don't even play those types of games. That stereotype kind of warded me off from the beginning because I thought, well, here I am, girl gamer, and I'm figuring it out, and I'm already going into an adverse situation. So I don't even try in some cases. I mean, it's just easier to find one of the games where I know I'm going to find safer spaces, which is essentially what I have been doing. But it would be nice to change some of those trends. And it sounds like with new developers, maybe we'll be doing that too.
Yeah. And I don't want to specifically like be rude towards teenage boys, but I had a little brother who was a teenage boy, and I remember him saying things and me as an ally having to correct him and be like, don't do that. That's not okay, brother. But teenage girls are horrible too. So I'm being a it's just a time in our life where I feel like people are I'm sorry, I'm gonna stop talking now.
One thing that I would add, though, and this is kind of subversive in like a cool way, as it pertains to fighting games, I do think specifically cis gay men have taken ownership of their femininity through female fighting game characters. Like, I don't know one gay man who plays fighting games that did not like main a female character. So we're talking Sonya Blade, Katana, Jade, Chun-Li, like those are like gay icons because of that. And it's gone to inspire folks to do many things. But one of the most satisfying things as a young person is like destroying this like homophobic, racist person with this female character and them just like groveling. Like that is just so satisfying.
Not that we are not encouraging paths of revenge, but we're just when you win, it's really, really fun, especially when you win against somebody who hasn't been nice to you. So I want to thank you, Jamel and Sean and Jamie. What I needed to laugh, and this was really fun. Thank you. See, this is kind of the preview of what something to talk about after hours is going to look like.
I'll look forward to it.
You're totally doing it. Thank you, everybody. And I will see everybody really soon. And I want to thank everybody who joined us today for the show. We are always really, really excited to be here with you and to get to spend 30 minutes with you. So if you need help, please go to pflag.org and visit us there. That is where you can connect with us, connect with our local chapters. pflag.org/find will get you to your closest PFLAG chapter. Remember, our articles are at at Straight for Equality /discussion series. Sorry, English is very difficult some days for me. But we are going to wrap up now. We will see you next week, same bat time, same bat channel. And we will leave you with the advice we do every single week, which is to run fast, to laugh hard, and to most of all, be kind. And even on top of that, wear your mask. We're all going to get through this, but let's all do the right thing. So we will see you next week. Thank you, everybody. Visit us at pflag.org. Bye.